Hello, welcome to my new video YouTube telecast. This is video 2. Today is November 22nd, 2021. The name of my broadcast is The USA Conflict with Russia and China. We'll spend the next 6 weeks or so just talking mostly about Russia, the background of Russia, the conflict with the USA, and anecdotes from the current news. Today we shall learn about Russia. Okay, in Russian that means "Сегодня мы будем учить об России." I understand a little bit of Russian, enough to be dangerous, but more than a tourist anyway. So again, my name is Ralph Schultz. The last time in video 1 I discussed the NATO buildup in the Black Sea and the Ukraine, and I did a long introduction to the course and myself. I recommend you go back and look at video 1 if you haven't seen it. These lectures are primarily a discussion, though, of my 2019 book, which you can buy online at Amazon or most bookstores in the USA, Canada, or in Europe, and some in Asia, in Taiwan. And it's a little hard to find in Asia. So, briefly, I was in Moscow for 5 weeks, actually 2 in Leningrad, 3 in Moscow, in the summer of 1968 with the Northwestern University Russian Department, studying Russian and sightseeing, if you will, going to out-of-way places, visited Lenin's tomb, went to a ballet where most of a third of the audience were Chinese communist officers in their army uniforms, and I had a wonderful time there. I learned a lot. It made quite an impression upon me. I speak about Russia. I enjoy just, reading it, studying it, and I do that until today. I've read several current books about it from authors that you see on television. I have a bachelor's degree quite a long time ago in history from Northwestern University, a bachelor's with honors, 1969, and the University of Chicago, MBA Finance, 1972. Both are prestigious universities worldwide. They're pretty good. I got lucky to go there. I had an athletic scholarship with Northwestern, and Chicago wasn't expensive then. I stayed at home, worked 3 days a week as a substitute teacher, took classes 2 days a week, and I got through there. They had B- average. Not bad anyway. It wasn't easy, I'll tell you that. So then I spent in 1972 to 1999-ish. I was in a career in the corporate bond trading in New York City and what is called Wall Street, and then I worked in New York and mostly in Chicago for Deutsche Bank, the largest bank in the world at that time. That's the German bank that helped or financed East Germany's acquisition by West Germany when they merged in 1992 or so. And I was a corporate lending officer, large, big-ticket, complex transactions, $3 million to $40 or $50 million at a pop. Okay. I'm going to have to refer to my notes from time to time, just like the big-time broadcasters used to do. Currently, I'm a part-time economics instructor, teaching micro and macroeconomics. I also was an All-American athlete in the 67-70 period in the 880-yard run, or 800 meters, and I almost made the U.S. Olympic team, and I set some American or Big Ten records. I was All-American, and I actually tied a world record indoors in the 1,000-yard run, 2.06, with Peter Snell of New Zealand, the world-renowned champion. I guess I got lucky. Everything came together that day. So here's a picture of the Tribune headlines to verify it. Quite an interesting thing, and quite proud of it. You notice Mickey Mantle retired that day. I got headlines and he didn't. Okay, so the basis of this series is to inform people what is not presented in the mass media. And the problem with the U.S. media is it just tells you what it wants to tell you. Okay, I don't care what side of the news it's on. And We're going to learn about the Russian and Chinese historical background, not in a boring way, what leads to their decisions today, and how they react and act in foreign policy and military policy against NATO and the U.S. Okay? So this will help you achieve a balanced viewpoint. That's what I want to do. And then you decide what your viewpoint, what you want to establish is your ideas about this complex topic. And it's a dynamic topic, okay? So, let me just say this. Russia is a big country. It's 10,000 kilometers across. It's 6,000 miles and about 2,000 kilometers from north to south. It's 1,200 miles. It's huge. It dwarfs all of Europe. It has a strong military, especially regionally. Be competitive with the United States. It has a good economy, despite what's said. It has a vibrant civilian economy, and it's free, just like, so let's say, Eastern Europe countries. And they have prosperity, certainly compared to the past, which was rather bleak. Here's the point: most of its military actions, political actions, in my opinion, are substantially defensive in nature, based on its history. I won't say entirely, but that is not brought out in the news. Okay? Who's the aggressor in the Black Sea? Well, U.S., NATO, United Kingdom, trying to help Ukraine. And Russia's responding defensively. It's all in video 1 and in my book. Everything's in my book. So I also want to say that in the news today, this gigantic 100,000 troop, 600 plus tank staging of the Russian army near the Belarus border, 240 kilometers or miles north of the Ukraine border. Let's see, 400 kilometers, 240 miles, I think. That's, day or 2 days drive in a tank, I think. Is a response. It's a defensive response. The Russians show they have power and they could move into Ukraine if they wanted to, just to remind the West before us guys, to us, from their point, we're the bad guys. And we consider them the bad guys. I don't consider anyone the bad guys, but I think the U.S. is making a mistake by being so bellicose and calling Russia the enemy. So, it's not preparation for an imminent invasion, but it is staged for an immediate invasion. I just believe this. I haven't read anything. I believe that Russian gigantic encampment is ready to go into battle formation and is ready to proceed according to an existing plan to cross into Ukraine. Call it an invasion. I'm not sure what their ultimate objective would be, but the higher officers, I believe, are ready to go as soon as they get the word from the Kremlin. It's a go. I really do. So anything can happen here. All right. So remember, as we get into this, Russia has been invaded many times from the West, and they had a war with Japan. They lost too for the last 400 years. That really colors their attitudes. And it has no very good geographic borders in the West. It's wide open from the Baltic to the Black Sea. And it has no real history of Western-style democratic liberalism, like England, the Magna Carta in 1250, France, Central Europe, and that includes Germany, didn't have any democratic history either, just a little in the 20s, and then after World War II. But there's no reason to expect Russia to become a liberal democracy overnight. It's not in their political culture, heritage. It's ruled by czars for centuries. And the Communist Party, and now Putin's government exerts we'll call it tight management. All right, it's a big country. It's hard to keep it focused. So, let me talk about my reasons for writing this book. I'm going to read from page 7 and 8, so this is the way some of it's going to be. I hope you don't get bored. Just listen intently. Pretend it's a podcast and it's just on the radio, okay? Because I have to read some of this to make. I want to get the right effect in. And I'll try not to read every word to you. All right. Why did I write this book? All right, because I wanted to express my thoughts and ideas that matter to me, that I want to many people to understand. I have a lifelong wealth of wisdom to teach, and I teach economics at a community college. I'm from New Mexico. I'm originally from Chicago, by the way. I also traveled to Russia, the Soviet Union in 1968. It made a major impression on me. I think athletes can and should speak out on issues they think are important. So this book is based upon extensive material I have read in many books, respected magazines, and internet sites in the mass media. It's not intended to be a scholarly work. It's kind of like a blog. I've synthesized that information I just said, and drawn conclusions. And I am a good thinker and analyst. And this book is about raising awareness. This book is my take and viewpoint on critical world issues affecting the United States. So, why would an athlete make commentaries? Because it is who I happen to be. Athletes are multifaceted. We can offer insights just as well as the experts you see on television. And I are directed towards the mass population of the U.S. and in Russia, or United Kingdom, Germany, and Hungary, for that matter. Okay. So my ideas here are food for thought to ponder and consider. We don't have to listen to so-called experts, politicians, and news people. And I'm not a national pundit, or a commentator you see on the news. I'm just another well-educated average person expressing my insights, and I think people need to know and understand this and evaluate to challenge I'm saying, the conventional ideas that are in the mass media, and then make informed decisions. Okay? This is important. All right? It's about the conflict with the United States, Russia, and China. In this case, can very well, and I believe it will, result in a brief but violent regional conventional missile war. We're going to present again the Russian and Chinese points of view, and I'm going to examine the conflict in Ukraine and the 2014 coup, the U.S. sponsored takeover of the Ukraine, taking advantage of a volatile, unstable period of time. And I suggest the solution to these ideas. And I also talk about the U.S. Economic issues today, and we'll get to that much later. I'll talk about the economic surge growth period of the U.S., 45 to 69, 70. That's when this country really grew. And so here we go. I'm going to get into the book now and the content. And I'm speaking to you, Americans who may be unclear, or disillusioned, and questioning our national elites. Here we go again. And that's right wing, left wing, center wing, it doesn't matter. And the media, leading the population oftentimes in the wrong direction. And I am dedicating this book to a kinder, gentler world. I repeat, a kinder, gentler world. Okay? All right, here, I'm going to keep rocking here. We got another 10 minutes or so. And so Russia's big, as I said. Look at starting page 58 if you have the book. Ask yourself these questions. Do you consider Russia to be an enemy? Explain to yourself or to somebody else your reasons. And if you're over the age of 60, were you afraid of communism way back when? 1960s, 70s, and 80s in Soviet Russia during the Cold War. Why? Why not? Think it through. Don't just give your reasons. There's a beautiful map of Imperial Russia on page 60. And this is in 1914, before the World War I began, and Russia basically had control of what was Finland, substantial part of Poland, Belarus, the Baltics, and parts of Romania. Russia is a powerful state, and it's to be reckoned with. So, we're going to dispel a few misconceptions and tend to mislead the American people. But remember, this book is not about Donald Trump nor Vladimir Putin, okay? And it's not about Russiagate. So, as I'm saying here, I went to Russia in 1968. I was 21. I was an idealistic young man. sort of intellectual, a history and political science major for the most part. So I really was interested in seeing another country, particularly one that was considered our enemy. Frankly, folks, as I've already said, they weren't my enemy, and they still aren't. I remember I was walking around and saying, this is the enemy. This is the nuclear power that's going to incinerate me in my city of Chicago. And I said, nah, this is really weird being here. So there may be government-to-government issues. There are always going to be. And I don't believe in having enemies unless it's something clearly extremely threatening and immediate. So I recently, this is like 3 years ago, when I say recently, I pulled my economics class college students about foreign enemies. Out of 28 students, only one student polled and considered Russia an enemy, 2 chose China, and 4 Iran. And then there was some overlap. Another young 26-year-old said she didn't get what all this stuff was about the U.S. having enemies. She didn't think so. So these millennials, and these kids in their 20s, I call them kids because I'm 74, didn't get what all this stuff was about, having the U.S. having enemies. She didn't think so. So these millennials are hope for the future. They don't have existential enemies, okay? Like our U.S. leaders and intellectuals and the neocons and the deep staters, if there is such a thing, intelligence services. The U.S. and Russia became afraid of each other due to certain ideological circumstances in the 1930s and 40s and Stalin's purge of Russia and Ukraine. That's terribly frightening. He was responsible for killing millions of people, his own people. Okay? So the Russians were and are kind people, and I enjoyed seeing how communists and Russian culture interacted with each other. I was in Red Square. It's a glorious, powerful place that goes back to past 1500. The Kremlin, which means fortress, is the center of government. As I have said, and I'll repeat myself, I stood in front of Vladimir Lenin, deceased, the founder of the Bolshevik Russian Party in 1970. He's in his tomb, encased in a plastic bubble casket. You can see him. I stood 2 feet from him. I slouched, bad posture as Americans do, with my hand in my pocket, and a Russian soldier grunted something at me. And he yanked my hand out of my pocket, pulled it straight down, and told me to be respectful. And that just said a lot to me, I'll tell you. I remember another time I met a Russian young economics graduate student, and he was probably 2 years older than me, maybe 25, and he pulled it straight down, and no, excuse me, gotta get my reading straight, don't I? Okay. What he said is, we were discussing communism and capitalism. He said, we just believe our system, Marxist communist system, socialism, pure socialism. We just believe our system, the planning type of economy in the long run will prove itself superior to yours, and yours will diminish. And he was very matter of fact about it. And that's exactly the opposite happened. And I'm not bragging about it. I really respect somebody that it's interesting to see somebody who believes wholeheartedly and sincerely in something that's just the opposite of your own culture and economy. So we have to be aware of other people's attitudes, folks, and their differences are just as valid as long as they don't cause any direct harm to us. Okay, now I'm going to venture in the more controversial, the current political and historical background of the issues, and we see in the mainstream U.S. media. Remember, this is food for thought and not a hard and fast statement. I attempt to search for the truth as I encounter it, even if it may be a result that is difficult to face. It is constructive then to mutually find a positive solution, a win-win solution. Today, Russia is a complex country, and we need to join together with them to fight the terrorist threat and find some commonalities of interest, realizing we're different countries with different backgrounds. And we can't change Russia and make it like the United States. And they can't change the United States to make it like Russia. Okay? We just have to accept each other as we are and realize we have interests that overlap and some that are a little contrary, but not try to change the other, but learn to live with them. I don't think American policy has done this. And sometimes ideology can really cause a lot of problems because you aren't always practical. You don't compromise. I tell my students that entrenched ideology of various isms, communism, capitalism, socialism, fascism, are harmful, cause strife and big misunderstandings. So let's be flexible. Countries are a blend of all systems. This is important, Congress. All right? We're a blend. It's not just socialism or just free markets. We just have less government projects than Western Europe, government support systems. Okay. You can't get everything you want. Even Henry Kissinger, the former White House advisor and Secretary of State, believes that you shouldn't get lost in ideology. Try to solve the issues of the time and maintain peace and stability in the world. It's called realpolitik. The persuasive, educated, well-intentioned newscasters generally do promote U.S. policy closely, but tend to admit important counterpoints of view. Look at Professor Stephen F. Cohen, deceased, a wonderful man, a Russian academic expert. He got very little TV time to express a contrary minority point of view about Russian foreign policy. So the vast American public could then make up their own mind. Noam Chomsky, a renowned American intellectual, linguistics professor from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, critiques American policies and gets zero press coverage. I think many reporters are so concerned about their careers they are afraid to deviate very much, because it's about ratings and network profits for their corporate owners. CNN is owned by Time Warner, a gigantic multi-billion-dollar corporation which a few years ago was trying to merge with AT&T, another giant. MSNBC is owned by the huge network NBC. These massive companies tend to inhibit risk-taking, contrary journalism, unlike the greats of the past like Walter Cronkite and Chet Huntley. It's the homogenation of the American news media, okay? And corporate power extends into Congress as well. Congress virtually thinks alike when it comes to foreign policy, especially towards Russia and China, except some senators that, a few Congress people that kind of float through there from time to time. So, internationally, Russia's going to retaliate if they're pushed too hard. So let's solve everything with diplomacy and reconciliation. Regarding Russia, it is not relevant whether or not they aggressively intervened in U.S. elections with cyberspace tactics. If it's true, and I say if, because I'm just going to take that approach, maybe yes, maybe no, in which U.S. intelligence insists it was just part of being on the defensive against Western encroachment to get a less intervention to hawkish U.S. president willing to at least consider Russian viewpoints, and that happened. However, that doesn't mean that such intrusion is acceptable. And it didn't change the result anyway. President Trump ran a brilliant campaign and he got a little lucky. Russia is very concerned that their way of life and independence is under attack. Is it? But interference in elections should never happen in any country. The Putin government is also, by the way, restoring respect for Russia. This is important. It's some of its past glory and world status. So is China. The USA is already there and wants to continue being on top, number one. So we also have to remember what the Soviet Union accomplished. Russia did a lot and has done a lot because it built a huge industrial base from practically nothing. Okay, it was destroyed in World War II, and it didn't have a substantial economy like the West was building. Okay, it built an immense infrastructure of hydroelectric dams, power grids, railroads, highways, cities, schools, hospitals, and an exceptional space rocketry program. They had the first man and dog in space, Yuri Gagarin, the cosmonaut, and Laika, the dog. Dog, by the way, is pronounced Subaka in Russian. Subaka. Now, all this was done mostly late 20s, 30s, 40s, into the 60s. They built a huge amount of housing. Now, it's still there today. It's not that well built, but they put a ton of housing up for millions of people in the 50s and 60s during the Khrushchev era. So remember, Russia has always been a country led by strong leaders in centralized power and control. For over 500 years, the Tsar, which means king in Russian, and the royal families ruled Russia with an iron fist for the most part. Dissent was barely tolerated. There is no real history of Western liberal democracy that praises the status of the individual and challenges the leadership of the country. So why should there be now? The Russian people accept a strong central state which has protected them from outside invaders, and there's been numerous ones. The workers and peasants were uneducated, and a very small layer of wealthy people controlled the country. Okay? Now they're called oligarchs. Income and power were extremely concentrated at the top. And like other European countries, China, Japan, and the USA, Russia was an empire that expanded and contracted. It believed its own culture and its supremacy. It required respect. It fought numerous wars, like the Crimean War against England and Turkey in 1856, and it lost. It fought Napoleon in 1812 and chased his army back to Paris. The Russian army actually marched into Paris temporarily. And Russia suffered tremendous losses in World War I, a war fought by the Tsar for the glory of Russia and the elite, not for the benefit of the people. Okay, that's important. When the Tsarist government was toppled in 1917, the Russian soldiers refused to fight and be exploited, put down their weapons, and walked back to Russia in the east, hundreds of miles, despite officers' attempts to stop them. The Bolsheviks were freeing their workers and peasants from oppressive and a mindless war based upon European royal family rivalries. World War II was worse. Germany flattened most of Russia, and 20 million civilians and 10 million soldiers perished. Over 3.5 long years, Russia pushed the German army back to Berlin, January of 1942 to April of 1945. This began after the Russian bloody victory at the Battle of Stalingrad, September 1942 to January 1943. There, 300,000 German soldiers were captured in the frigid winter. The largest tank battle ever fought, with several thousand tanks, was in Kursk, Belarus in 1943. Germans pushed the Russians back for a few days and then took some horrendous losses. Okay, the defeat demoralized the German army and enraged Hitler, who had planned a major counterattack to stop the Russian advance. German losses were heavy. And I want to add, the USA gave Russia, the Soviet Union, an incredible amount of supplies, which they shipped in through the northern ports. Tanks, clothing, parts, weapons, ammunition. And with the USA's supply help, without it, I don't think Russia could have defeated Germany the way they did. And so, strangely, it was a joint venture. But the Russians took the violence. This is not some top secret thing. This is just anything you can, it's all public information, and I'm here to teach. Okay, good day. До свидания.